So you want to own a racing stable, silks in your own colors, a horse thundering down the stretch at Churchill Downs or Saratoga with your name in the program, a trip to the winner's circle with a garland of flowers. It's one of the oldest status purchases in the world, the sport of kings. And it still sells that dream every single year at every yearling auction in Kentucky. Here's the number that should stop you before you write a check. According to the Thoroughbred Owners and Breeders Association, fewer than 10 out of every 100 racehorses in training earn back enough in purse money to cover their own annual carrying costs. Not turn a profit, just break even on the bill. One longtime Louisiana owner described racehorse ownership as being permanently, in his words, under financial construction. The costs never actually finish. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what it costs to own and train a racehorse, how a purse actually gets split up before a dollar reaches your pocket, why the prize money you're chasing might not even come from horse racing in the first place, and where the real financial engine behind this entire sport is quietly hiding. Version 1. The Solo Claiming Owner. You buy a single, already racing horse out of a claiming race, sometimes for as little as $2,500, and you can have that horse running. Owning a racing stable isn't one business. It's three, all wearing the same silks. Back under your name within a few weeks. It's the cheapest way into the sport, and it's also the version where you're most exposed, one bad vet bill away from the whole thing going sideways. Version 2. The Racing Partnership or Syndicate. Instead of buying one horse outright, you buy a small percentage share, sometimes a few $1,000s for 5% of a horse, spreading your risk across several horses instead of betting everything on one. You give up a meaningful slice of any big win, but you also give up the gut punch of a single horse's injury wiping out your entire stable. Version 3. The Full Breeding and Racing Operation. Buy or breed yearlings, race the promising ones, and retire the successful stallions and mares to a breeding program that can generate stud fees running from a few $1,000s up to tens of thousands per cover on a proven champion. This version is genuinely capital intensive, but it's the only one of the three where the business doesn't end when the horse stops racing. A claiming horse can be had for a few $1,000s. A solid, sound horse with some upside might run somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000. At the very top of the yearling sales, prices run into the millions, almost entirely based on pedigree and how the horse looks walking in a sales ring, since none of them have actually raced yet. Then the real cost begins. Keeping a single horse in training averages somewhere around $45,000 a year. The single biggest line item is the trainer's day rate, commonly somewhere between $85 and $120 a day, depending on the track and the trainer's reputation, and that day rate is supposed to cover the groom, the exercise rider, the hot walker, and basic supplies. On top of that, add farrier visits at roughly $125 a session, monthly vet care that can run several hundred to several $1,000s depending on what the horse needs, and transportation anytime the horse ships to a different track. Then there are entry fees, typically 2 to 3% of the purse just to run in the race, and insurance, if you choose to carry it, at 3 to 8.5% of the horse's value every year. None of this is optional. All of it is due whether the horse finishes first or finishes last. Here's the part that catches new owners off guard. Even when a horse does win, the purse doesn't land in the owner's account in one clean check. In a typical purse split, the winner takes home somewhere around 60% of the total purse. Second place gets roughly 20%, and third gets around 10%, with smaller shares trickling down further. Everyone below that gets little or nothing for the exact same amount of training bills that month. And before the owner even sees their 60%, the trainer and jockey take their cut straight off the top, commonly 10% each for a win, with smaller commissions for a second or third place finish. So on a $10,000 winning purse, the trainer and jockey combined can take $2,000 before the owner ever sees a dime, on top of the day rate the owner already paid that month regardless of the outcome. Zoom out further, and the entire purse pool itself is funded by pari-mutuel wagering, the pool-based betting system where bettors wager against each other instead of against the track. The track takes what's called a takeout, typically somewhere between 15 and 25% of every dollar wagered before a single winning ticket gets paid out. That takeout is what funds the purses, the state's cut, and the track's own operating costs. Every layer of this business, from the takeout to the trainer's commission, takes its piece before the owner, the person who actually paid for the horse and its upkeep every single month, gets anything at all. Now, for the part of this business, almost no owner fully appreciates until they've been in it for a few years, and it's not really about the horse at all. At a meaningful number of racetracks across the country today, the purse money owners are chasing doesn't actually come primarily from horse racing. It comes from slot machines. Beginning in the 1990s and 2000s, a wave of states legalized what's called a racino, a racetrack with a casino attached, and required by law that a slice of the slot machine and video lottery revenue be funneled directly into horse racing purses. In Pennsylvania, slot revenue was funding roughly 90% of thoroughbred and harness racing purses as of the mid-2010s. In Ohio, racino contributions to harness racing purses hit $10.5 million in 2024 alone, up nearly 30% in a single year. Here's the uncomfortable part for anyone who romanticizes the sport. The racing side of a racino is, in a very real sense, being kept alive as a regulatory obligation, the price a gaming company pays for the right to run slot machines on that piece of land in the first place. The owner in the winner's circle, the horse, the silks, the whole spectacle, is increasingly a beneficiary of a casino subsidy that most fans, and a lot of owners, have never heard of. Scenario 1. An owner enters through a racing partnership, buying a 5% share in several claiming-level horses instead of 100% of one, at a small track supported by a nearby racino with subsidized, inflated purses. The budget is disciplined from day one, factoring in the full $45,000 annual training cost per horse, spread across shares instead of carried solo. One horse in the group wins consistently at the claiming level, generating steady if modest purse checks that, split across partners, roughly offset the annual cost of that partner's overall stake. Nobody gets rich. Nobody goes broke either. The subsidized purse structure and the spread-out risk are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. An owner buys a single well-bred yearling at auction for $200,000, chasing the dream of a stakes winner and eventual stud career. The horse is sound but unspectacular, finishing in the money occasionally but never contending for the purses that would meaningfully offset $45,000 a year in training costs. 3 years and over $100,000 in cumulative training and vet bills later, the horse has earned back a fraction of what it cost to buy, let alone to keep. There's no breeding value in an unspectacular racing record, so the retirement plan the owner once imagined never materializes either. The horse is the same species, the ambition was the same, but the entry point, one expensive horse carrying all the risk alone, was the entire difference between these two outcomes. So the next time someone describes owning a racehorse as buying into the sport of kings, that part is true. But the money underneath that dream is stranger than it looks. Fewer than 1 in 10 horses ever earns back what it costs to keep. The purse that does exist gets split by the track, the state, the trainer, and the jockey before the owner sees a cent. And at a growing number of tracks, the purse itself was never really funded by horse racing at all. It was funded by a casino's slot machines, quietly propping up a sport that couldn't fully pay for itself anymore. The horse was never really the product. The subsidy standing behind the purse, and whether you understood that before you wrote the check, that's the actual asset.